Hello everyone, welcome back. Today I want to talk a little history with you guys. I want to talk about the Black Death, which is a plague that inflicted Europe in the mid 1300s, and I think that's kind of relevant to what's going on today with the coronavirus. Now, throughout history there were many plagues, but they were usually more isolated. The Black Death was a plague that inflicted all of Europe. And basically it killed off 25% of the European population. And that's usually what people say when they're talking about the Black Death. They'll say it killed 25% of the European population, but what they don't normally tell you is that it actually killed 90% of the people in the cities. So the cities were more heavily affected by it, and what most likely happened is that the villages were probably not affected very much. I would think that if you had a village that was affected by it, you probably had 90% of the people that died in that village, but most villages were not affected at all. And the reason was that people just didn't travel around a whole lot. Most people were born, lived, and died within 50 miles of their village. Now, the other interesting thing that I think affected this very much is between the years 1000 AD and 1300, the population of Europe doubled. I think that's a very significant factor because, and most of that population is going to be in the cities. So all of a sudden you have more people in the cities, creating a lot more waste and sewage. And that, I believe, is a very important component because the cause of the Black Death was a virus that was transmitted by the fleas that were on rats. Okay, so the rats were carrying fleas that had the virus, and people had no reason to suspect this because they had been living with rats for centuries. Okay, so at the time, people practiced social distancing. Right, they were afraid of each other. But they were not afraid of the rats. There was no reason why they would be afraid of rats any more than they'd be afraid of any of the other farm animals. They had no reason to suspect the fleas any more than they would, certain seeds or pollen or anything else, or dirt or anything else in their daily lives. Rats are simply something that have been around and have been living with humans for many centuries. But that's what it ended up being. It ended up being the fleas carrying a virus that were hitching a ride on top of the rats. The rats are probably significant here to the extent that because the populations in the cities had doubled right over the course of this 300 years, you had a lot more rats. So that increased the chance. So more people, more rats, you get a plague. Now the interesting thing about the Black Plague is that it still exists today. What scientists did is they dug up the graves where they knew that people were buried who had died of the Black Plague, and they've been able to, through the remains, whatever they found, they've been able to isolate that virus, which still exists today. So the virus exists today, but we are all immune to it. And we're immune to it through natural selection or evolution, right? Now, evolution is not what people think it is. Evolution is not morphing. You don't change from one thing to another. The way that worked out is, for example, in the cities, 90% of the people died. So the 10% of the people that were left ended up mating with each other, right? So their offspring were immune to this. To this virus because both of the parents were immune to it. So because the people left, all the people left were immune to it. All the offspring were also immune to it, and that trait has been passed down to us. So that's basically an example of evolution and how that works. Okay. So another interesting thing is that I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the nursery rhyme "Ring Around the Rosie." Well, that's actually about the Black Death. Okay, kids used to sing about the Black Death. Children were not sheltered back then the way they are today. There was a much higher mortality rate People did not expect to die of natural causes. They did not expect to live to an old age. If you, back then, if you had, let's say, 10 brothers and sisters, by the time you became an adult, half of your brothers and sisters would have probably died. So that's something that people were a lot more comfortable with back then. Okay, so a couple of things for you guys to think about with regards to plagues. And if you go back and you look at the Black Death of the mid 1300s, you'll get a lot of useful information. You'll get a different perspective. Today we tend to look at everything through our modern perspective, right? It's important to understand that the way that we look at things just our perspective is only about 100 to 150 years old. Okay, for most of human history, right, which is human history is about 5,000 years. People had a very different way of looking at things. So when you study history, don't look at it through your modern perspective. Try to understand the perspective of the people that were living through it, and how they saw things and how they interpreted things. So if you guys have any comments, please put in the comment section. If you're not a member of the channel, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys soon.